Welcome to Face Values, the podcast where we peel back the layers of cosmetic surgery and skincare to help you understand how your skin is aging and what you can do about it. I'm Dr. David Jack. I'm a cosmetic doctor and skincare brand founder. I'm based in London. I've got clinics in London and Edinburgh. I've got a real interest in just understanding more about how the skin ages. So I'm going to be joined by lots of guests who are real experts in the field. So I hope you enjoy and keep tuning in. So in this episode, we're joined by Jane Green, who is an award-winning author and columnist. So Jane, you speak to lots of women,
yes.
And there are sort of attitudes towards aging have changed a lot in the recent years. Particularly when there's aesthetic treatments available and things, more and more people are kind of getting interested in this. Have you noticed that in people that are writing into you at all?
Well, because I'm going to throw this in here. I'm Dear Jane in the Daily Mail. So I do get lots of letters every week from people struggling with problems. Actually, sort of skincare and aesthetics is not something I've come up with or I've come across yet. But I am fascinated by women aging, and particularly by women at sort of my stage of life, which is, you've gone through menopause, your children have left, you're looking at your husband thinking, why? Not all of us, some of us. But also I think actually more than anything, your hormones have changed, so you no longer have that need to nurture, and so suddenly your whole world for decades has been about a husband and children and nurturing other people, and suddenly it's just about you, really, and which is fantastic if you have a purpose. But most of us don't have a purpose. Most of us find ourselves completely stranded, sometime in our early to mid-50s, wondering what on earth we're going to do with the rest of our life.
But I don't believe for a second you have ever felt stranded. You're someone who I know has always had purpose.
And yet I still felt stranded. This was the extraordinary thing. I always thought I couldn't wait for the emptiness. I wasn't the natural earth mother I always thought I would be. In fact, I found it utterly overwhelming. And I was the breadwinner, so I was very focused on my career. I couldn't wait for my children to leave. I just thought, oh, joy, I'm going to have my life back. But actually, I felt utterly lost, really. And it wasn't so much because the children weren't around. I think it was more that I'd been seen by the world, yes, as this author and this columnist, but also as a mother. And suddenly I didn't have the children. And then, of course, menopause hit at the same time. And so everything started to feel a bit saggy and a bit... And I didn't really know who I was supposed to be. And actually, I've been writing quite a lot recently about a concept that I've called rewilding. Yes. Because I feel like the process that I've been going through has been about rewilding myself. And what that means for me is stripping away all of the constructs of who we're told we have to be or who we think we have to be as adult women, as wives, as mothers, as grown-ups in the world, and going back to those fearless, brave little girls before anybody told us that we had to be anywhere at all. We didn't know that we were supposed to squeeze ourselves into boxes, and kind of that wildness. That's what I think. That's the gift. Yes. Of aging. The gift of aging is actually stripping it all back. And by the way, this has to come after a period of pain. You can't just slide into that. There has to be some pain to get there. But one of the gifts, if you choose, is to go back to your most authentic inner self. Yeah.
So Jane, somebody listening to this who thinks, gosh, I would love to rewild. I would love to connect with that younger self, that true, wild, larger self of mine. But how on earth do I do that sitting here right now, listening to you? I don't have the kind of life that you have. How do I rewild?
So I think, first of all, my life does look exceptionally glamorous on Instagram, but actually that's always curated. And in fact, this is a huge part of it. Part of my rewilding, a huge part of it was letting go of shame. And it was shame of not being good enough. And I'd had, I was the sole breadwinner. I was carrying 6 children and I could on a dwindling income. And yet we were living in a town where I felt so judged and my husband, we were all, you had to be keeping up with the Joneses. And it was exhausting. And I felt like I was spinning plates and spinning stories about, well, yes, we sold the big house because of X, Y, not telling anyone the truth, which was we just couldn't afford it. And actually the first step in my rewilding was being honest, was starting to be honest with myself and with other people and saying, so my life does look perfect on Instagram, but actually my life isn't perfect. And we sold the big house not because I was worried about the water coming in, which was the story I created, but because we just couldn't afford it. And I'm actually living in this shitty little cottage that I'm not very happy in. Well, I made it beautiful because I very much believe that the key to happiness in life is not getting what you want, it's wanting what you've got. And so there I was living in this shitty little cottage and I had a choice. I could either wake up every day and be resentful and miserable and hate it, or I could wake up every day and choose to be happy because this was where I was. But I found that was the first step in rewilding. Also, I think radical self-acceptance. And that is so, for example, for years I have struggled with my weight and with my self-image. And even actually when I grew up as a child being told that I was overweight and I was enormous. And I look back at pictures of myself as a child now, I was normal. I was completely normal. And yet I carried that shame for years. I'm not thin enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not clever enough. And then sort of going through this stage of just thinking, nobody cares, but more importantly, I need to stop being so hard on myself because nobody was harder on me than me, and actually really learning to love myself. And I mean, honestly, I did it. There was meditation involved. There was a lot of introspection. There was a lot of kind of journaling. There was a lot of reading. There was a lot of observation. And I will confess I used magic mushrooms, which was in a therapeutic, I used them in a therapeutic way. And I did 3 journeys and it was utterly transformative. Now, obviously we're sitting here talking about aging and there is an aesthetic part of this. And I think that for me, radical self-acceptance, which doesn't mean that you never have to do anything, to make yourself feel better. Part of that is also feeling as good as you can, whilst also being able to look at yourself very clearly in the mirror. You have to really love yourself and understand that if you're going to do these little improvements, they're little. It's the tiniest little subtle touches that make the difference. And I do know too many women, particularly in America, where I lived for 23 years, who have what I consider to be almost a dysmorphia, where they start and they don't stop. And so everybody ends up looking the same, actually. They also end up aging themselves because, of course, when you have that much work done, it's impossible to tell whether you're 65, 75, 45.
Yeah, absolutely. So this rewilding, what was the kind of stimulus, would you say, for this? Was there something that happened that caused a switch in you, or has it been something that's kind of been in you that you just gradually decided that you just thought, well, life is not what I want it to be, and I'm just going to change things?
Salima's laughing. Do you remember what it was? I think it was Marrakesh, but I'm not sure.
Really?
So I had been living in suburbia for 23 years. I'm not a suburban girl.
Yeah.
And actually one of the things that I discovered about myself when I started this process of and actually it happened on my 50th birthday. I remember very clearly looking in the mirror on my 50th birthday and saying to myself, I'm so tired of being a chameleon and of making myself fit into what other people and what the world wants me to be. I have no idea who I am. Who would you be if you stopped caring what anybody thought of you? And that was really when it started. And then I went to Marrakesh. I wrote a book about a woman called Talita Getty, who was this sort of, she created boho luxe, hippie chic in the late 60s. And she was married to the son of the richest man in the world. And they lived in this palace in Marrakesh with this extraordinarily hedonistic lifestyle. The Rolling Stones were there all the time, and Jane Fonda, all having these crazy parties. And she brought me to Marrakesh because I wrote Sister Stardust about Talita Getty. And Marrakesh woke me up. The colours, the smells, it was like a feast for the senses. And I came back to life. And I realised that I've been slightly sleepwalking through my life for many years, and Marrakesh brought me back to life. So I moved there.
Yes.
And that is where I now live.
Yeah.
Which, for me, listening to you is really quite joyous, because obviously Jane and I have been friends now for a while, dear friends, and the Jane sitting in front of me now is actually very different to the Jane that I met those years ago, because you always had this essence, you always had, I recognise you still, but I can see you're completely connected to who you really are right now in a very different way to when we first met.
And do you know what's really funny about that? When you are completely, and I don't want to, I'm going to use this word because it's the best word, but it's so overused at the moment. But when you are completely authentic, when you are absolutely tuned in to who you are, and also as a woman to your power, because when we carry tremendous power, our intuition is extraordinary, our emotional intelligence, if we choose to tap into it, if you choose to tap into it and you stand in it and you claim it, it reverses time. I mean, yeah.
Time doesn't exist.
Yes, time doesn't exist. I feel younger today than
it's the space that you're taking up, not literally, but I think many women shrink over the years in terms of what they feel able to say, what's polite, what's appropriate. Does my opinion still count? Am I still relevant? And what I've seen in you, and which is what I've learnt from you, which is, I think, similarly, I've also learned an expansion over these last few years. You really take up your rightful space now.
It's such an interesting thing because I think so often, especially in the West, I know this to be true of the States. I don't know if it's as true in the UK, but I think when women hit their 50s, they become invisible.
Yeah.
And it was very shocking to me when I actually decided to go grey, which I have now slightly reversed because I am now single and I don't need to age myself anymore for the moment, but I'm looking forward to going back to being grey again soon. But the minute I went grey, I became completely invisible.
Did you really see that?
It was extraordinary. And I particularly saw it with the yummy mummies.
Sure.
So all of the young yummy mummies who, up until I went grey, would still, if I walked into a restaurant, yes, they can see I'm clearly much older than them, but I'm kind of cool.
Yeah.
They'd still check me out. They'd still give me the sweep. You know, the up and down, like, the sweep. What's she wearing? Oh, those are kind of cool boots. Oh, I like her joy. I turned grey. It was like they didn't see it. It was like I was wearing Harry Potter's invisibility cloak. Nobody noticed me. And yet now, in stepping into my power, really, and it is a power, people are drawn. People are drawn to me. The other thing is, when you're trying to be someone you're not, if you're trying to be sophisticated or cool or elegant or whatever it is, or you're trying to be trendy, or when you're trying, people can smell that falseness, and it keeps them away. It creates a barrier.
It does, yeah.
And so what you want in life, the freedom comes with just getting rid of all those barriers and just being you. And then, of course, are there going to be people who don't like it? Of course, but that's okay because they're not supposed to be in your world. Yeah. But you get, it is fascinating to me how wherever I go, people start talking to me.
Mm-hmm. And Jen, you mentioned about the mushroom journeys as well. And we can cut this if you don't feel.
No, I'm perfectly comfortable.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me about how do you feel that has contributed to this kind of rediscovery of yourself and your inner self, this confidence that.
So when the pandemic hit, for me there are a number of things that hit at the same time. The pandemic hit. I was having real financial trouble, so we had to sell my beloved house, which I really, really loved. Menopause. My children left home. I mean, obviously they were back for the pandemic, which was also not easy. But my children were off at university, ostensibly or supposed to be. And then I lost my dearest friend. We had a big blow up that was never to be repaired. And I plunged into a depression that was very dark. And I have suffered from depression. So I was diagnosed with clinical depression when I was, I think, 21. But it's always been sort of low grade and manageable. And I've always embraced it, actually, because I found if I fight it, it just makes it worse. And so everybody who knows and loves me knows that there are periods of time when I just go to ground and I just go to bed. And but this was not that. This was much heavier and much darker. And of course, there were also tremendous issues in my marriage that I wasn't able to face. And I found myself in a really dark place where I did not see any point to life. And it wasn't that I ever had suicidal ideation. I didn't think about taking my own life. I just wanted somebody else to take it for me. I wanted it to be over. I hoped it would be painless, and I hoped it would happen soon, because there was no joy whatsoever in life, and I couldn't see any time in which there would be joy again. And I had never experienced that before. And then I met somebody who had been using psychedelics and magic mushrooms specifically in a therapeutic way. And she said, I'm part of a church and they have a journey coming up. And why don't you do this journey with me? And I did. And the first journey was, the experience was wonderful. What I didn't understand at the time, what I've now come to understand through reading the science behind it, is that when we are depressed, our thought patterns follow the same neural pathways. And so all of the branches that lead to happiness and joy shut down. They literally go dark. And your brain cannot access them. They're just turned off. And what the psychedelics do is they light them back up again. But it doesn't happen immediately. And I remember after that first journey, I thought, well, that was lovely, but I don't feel any different. And then I did a second journey. And then I did a third. And I wasn't even really thinking about my life. And then I went to do a book event. And we took photographs. And I remember later that night looking at the photographs from the book event. And I looked at my face. And I thought, oh, there you are. I recognise you. You're back. And it had so sort of imperceptibly crept up on me. But I realised that I was happy again. Now, I still had a lot of issues. But I had joy back in my life. And those neural pathways were lit up again. And not for a second since then have I ever wanted my life to be over. In fact, I truly feel that my life is filled with joy every day. I am, it's just filled with joy and happiness.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. So, Jen, your new book is written yet, or you're in the process of writing it?
So my new novel,
new novel
is because I write the agony aunt for the Daily Mail.
Yes.
Dear Jane.
Yeah.
It's the sort of meta novel of my life. So it's Dear Jane the novel. So weirdly, it's about a 50-something agony aunt whose children leave home. Although it is also very much fictionalized in this book. Yeah. The husband makes this terrible investment in what is essentially a Ponzi scheme, and all the money is gone, and they have a huge blowout, and she runs away to Marrakesh to find herself. It's not based on my life at all. And I am in rewrite mode.
Okay.
Right now. So Dear Jane, the novel, is being written. I can't imagine, where are we, August? It's not going to be next summer now. It's going to be probably 2026. Although you never know. It depends who I publish with. It depends what happens with the publishing of this book. So
and you rewilding, you've written already.
No, rewilding. I'm writing a lot of pieces about it on social media. So whether or not there's something in that remains to be seen. But for now, I just wrote about what I've been writing very honestly about what I'm going through. And as I was writing one day, I just thought I'm in the process of rewilding myself, and I'd just been reading about the movement of rewilding gardens and bringing them back to sort of indigenous native plantings and all that, and I thought, that's what I'm doing. And so I decided to call it Rewilding myself, but it seems to have resonated with people, so I think there's something in that. I'm not quite sure what it is yet. Maybe I'll be challenging you in the podcast world. We shall see. Yeah,
great. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Jane.
It's been the pleasure has been all mine. Thank you.
And if people want, they obviously can read your column in the Daily Mail.
Yes.
But if people want to follow you on Instagram and your journey,
thank you. Yes, at Jane Green Author. Yes, great. Lots of wisdom and caftans.
Probably nothing better than that.
No, exactly.
Great. So thanks all for listening. That was Jane Green, who is an award-winning author and columnist in the Daily Mail. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe to it on whatever platform that you're listening to your podcasts on, and I hope you join us in the next episode.